Cancer, ruled by the moon, carries within a sacred memory of emotional constancy and spiritual coherence. Governed by tides both earthly and cosmic, the sign of Cancer does not merely feel, it remembers. It remembers who you were, how you looked at them in moments of vulnerability, how you showed up when no one else did. Cancer has a soul anchored in emotional time, not chronological time. When someone begins to shift, to transform into a version of themselves that contradicts who they once claimed to be, Cancer does not merely notice. They ache, not out of control or bitterness, but because they have loved and trusted deeply, and when what once felt safe begins to fracture, their inner world trembles like the sea under a storm moon. To be loved by Cancer is to be etched into the fabric of their soul. And when people change, when their affection turns cold, when their promises erode, when their essence becomes unfamiliar, Cancer becomes a witness to a silent betrayal, one where no vows were broken aloud, yet everything sacred has been lost. They do not rage in the fire like Aries, nor do they sever ruthlessly like Scorpio. Instead, they retreat, quietly haunted by echoes of what once was, piecing together the subtle inconsistencies, holding in their heart the ghost of the version of you that once aligned with your words and actions. Cancer is ruled by the moon, the ancient mirror of hidden truths and emotional tides. They know when something has shifted, not in behavior alone, but in energy, in presence, in the warmth behind a touch, in the hesitation behind words. And so, when they observe someone change so much that they no longer recognize them, it feels like witnessing the death of a sacred truth. It's not drama. It's devastation born from deep perception, because Cancer doesn't merely form bonds. They merge. They become emotionally intertwined with the version of you that once felt real, authentic, pure. And when that soul contract begins to unravel, even if silently, Cancer knows. They always know. This dissonance doesn't only apply to romantic relationships. Friends, family, even colleagues. Anyone who once wore the mask of sincerity, of genuine connection. Cancer holds them in a sacred emotional registry. They offer loyalty from the marrow of their being, expecting not perfection but emotional integrity. When someone enters their orbit with one frequency and over time reveals another, especially if it's fueled by hypocrisy, cold detachment, or manipulation, Cancer's shell becomes their cathedral. They withdraw, not out of weakness, but to protect the temple of memory, the sanctuary of what once was beautiful before it was defiled by deception or emotional dissonance. But from this pain arises a warrior of a different kind. Cancer transforms not through external conquests but through emotional resurrection. Their silent suffering births resilience, and their heartbreak becomes a forge. For every person who betrayed their emotional intelligence, Cancer learns to guard their intuition with armor of discernment. They stop romanticizing red flags. They stop defending the undefendable. They begin to walk away, not out of bitterness but with a sacred knowing that some things are not worth bleeding for twice. And in doing so, they become sovereign. They stop trying to resuscitate what another heart chose to kill. Even in their silence, Cancer holds wisdom. They see the patterns. They feel the contradictions. And though they may not speak it aloud, they carry the truth in their bones. They become the keeper of emotional justice in a world that often celebrates performative kindness while hiding cruel intentions. Cancer is not fooled by the surface. They see through eyes that have wept and healed, that have trusted and been shattered, that have loved and been forgotten. But Cancer is not merely a victim of emotional tides. They are also the tide itself. When they finally release those they no longer recognize, they do so with the same power that the sea withdraws from a broken shoreline. They cleanse. They regenerate. They become stronger. They remember who they are beyond the version of themselves shaped by the pain others gave them. They rise as a new force, wiser, more intuitive, more sovereign, less available to what is unworthy. From this, Cancer becomes a lighthouse rather than a life raft. They stop saving those who choose their own emotional shipwrecks. They illuminate truth silently, consistently, guiding only those who dare match their depth, who speak in the same emotional language not just when it's convenient, but especially when it's difficult. They no longer grieve those they no longer recognize. Instead, They bless the lesson and move on. Their heart, once shattered, becomes the birthplace of legacy. They pass through emotional death and rebirth countless times, becoming more timeless with each transformation. Their soul, nourished by the moon, no longer bends for the ephemeral. They are here to anchor truth, to nurture what is real, to defend what is sacred. So if Cancer no longer recognizes you, it's not that they've forgotten. It's that they've seen behind the veil. They have observed the silent undoing of trust, the evolution not toward truth but toward estrangement. And when they finally let go, they do so with the power of the tide reclaiming itself. Quiet, final, and utterly divine. There is a sacred melancholy in the way Cancer processes emotional disillusionment. Not because they are weak, but because they are built to feel with a depth that few dare to inhabit. Their soul is a vessel of memory, shaped by the lunar rhythms that govern their intuition and dreams. When someone changes and no longer resembles the essence they once revealed, Cancer does not merely feel loss. They experience a form of emotional betrayal that echoes through every chamber of their spirit. They don't mourn simply the relationship or the connection. They mourn the soul behind the eyes, the tone of voice that once vibrated in harmony with truth, the energy that once felt like home. What many don't understand is that Cancer is not naive. They do not idealize blindly. Their love is not foolish. It is conscious, intentional, and layered. They give people the chance to reveal their truest selves, believing that what is shown in sincerity should be honored. So when people reveal a different face over time, one crafted through convenience, ego, or manipulation, it breaks something ancient in Cancer's trust toward humanity. This is not just heartbreak. It is a kind of sacred disillusionment that forces Cancer to re-examine their faith in emotional transparency. But there is power in this unraveling. Cancer's journey is one of alchemical transmutation. Every wound becomes a new chamber in their emotional fortress, not one built of stone, but of wisdom. Where others collapse under the weight of betrayal, Cancer endures. They carry the emotional truth not as a burden, but as a banner. They rise from disappointment like the moon re-emerges from eclipse, renewed, clarified, luminous in its silence. There is an inner nobility that drives Cancer to still wish well upon those who hurt them, even if only from afar. They may no longer recognize the person you've become, but in their heart, they still honor who you once were. That is not weakness. That is strength beyond the comprehension of many. It is a quiet refusal to allow bitterness to define their journey. Even when they are forced to walk away, they do so with a grace forged by heartbreak and rebirth. When people change, not through natural evolution but through the erosion of integrity, Cancer feels it on a soul level. And in that recognition, they make the hardest choice: to preserve their essence rather than sacrifice it for what has already been lost. They stop explaining themselves. They stop trying to convince others of what should have been felt intuitively. They step away, not in resentment but in sacred self-respect. The epic power of Cancer lies in their ability to remain emotionally sovereign even after their sanctuary has been violated. They become the protectors of their own inner kingdom, no longer opening the gates to those who do not value its sanctity. Their heart may have been open like a cathedral once, but now it has become a temple accessible only to the worthy, those who arrive with consistent truth and unwavering emotional integrity. They evolve with the quiet ferocity of the moon cycling through its phases, each stage imbued with magic, with wisdom, with purpose. They do not rush healing. They do not force closure. They let time and the tides do their sacred work. And when they return to the world, they do so with a gaze sharpened by knowing, and a soul that no longer fears solitude. In solitude, they find clarity. In stillness, they find their own voice again, one that no longer echoes the false promises of others. Cancer's emotional intuition becomes their compass. They no longer betray it for convenience, for illusion, or for the comfort of familiarity. They trust their knowing. They trust the sensation that something is off, even when no one else understands it. They stop needing external validation for internal truth. They become unshakable in their perception, refined in their boundaries, and regal in their emotional discernment. There is divinity in Cancer's ability to let go without losing their capacity to feel. They are not hardened. They are refined. They are not closed. They are selective. They do not hate. They remember. They remember what was. They honor what can no longer be, and they walk forward into futures where they no longer beg to be seen. They are seen by the stars, by the moon, by the ancestral power that courses through their being. They no longer need others to validate their depth, because they have become their own sanctuary. And so, Cancer continues silent and sovereign, watching the tides shift, listening to the language of energies unspoken, loving without attachment, releasing without bitterness, rising always like the moon from the horizon, glowing not because they are untouched by pain, but because they have transmuted it into radiance. Cancer's path is carved not by the hand of fate alone, but by the emotional wisdom gathered across lifetimes. Governed by the moon, this sign holds the weight of ancestral memory in its soul. When someone they once trusted begins to shift into a stranger, it is not a surface-level confusion. It is a fracture in the sacred lineage of emotional truth that Cancer is here to preserve. They do not only observe the change, they feel it ripple through dimensions of memory, like a bell tolling in an ancient cathedral whose sound can no longer reach those who have turned away from their original resonance. There is an epic quality in Cancer's ability to endure this kind of transformation in others. While the world often praises loud strength, Cancer teaches the strength of presence, of stillness, of staying true to one's emotional code even when others abandon theirs. They do not react impulsively to the shift. They do not declare war on those who evolve into something unrecognizable. Instead, they descend into the depths of their inner sea, seeking to understand, to feel, to reconcile the duality between what was promised and what is now presented. And even when clarity comes cloaked in sorrow, they emerge from those depths with wisdom that only silence can teach. What is often underestimated about Cancer is the sacred rage that lives beneath their calm exterior. It is not the rage of vengeance, but the fury of the heart when sacred bonds are desecrated. It is the cry of the moon when her light is cloaked by shadows. This fire does not explode outward. It burns inward, purifying the soul, sharpening their discernment, and refining their standards. Cancer becomes a guardian of energetic truth, unwilling to carry the emotional debris of others who refuse to walk in sincerity. They no longer water roots that grow in poisoned soil. They no longer romanticize the potential of someone who has clearly abandoned their own truth. Cancer's journey teaches that not every person is meant to stay, and not every connection is eternal in form, even if it was in intention. This sign walks the path of spiritual maturity, learning that release can be an act of love, that detachment can be the ultimate protection of one's essence. When someone shifts into a version that contradicts who they once were, Cancer's intuition does not demand an explanation. It accepts, it adjusts, it retreats not to escape, but to regenerate. In that sacred solitude, Cancer sheds the emotional skin of a past that no longer breathes, emerging reborn, not hardened but elevated. They do not need to confront the changing soul with anger, because their very absence becomes a mirror. Their silence speaks of the gravity of the loss, not as punishment, but as testament to the value of what was broken. In the empty space left behind, those who have drifted often come to realize what they abandoned, the unwavering love of someone who once saw them completely, without masks, without conditions. Cancer's emotional landscape becomes mythic in proportion. They become the keeper of emotional archetypes, the guardian of purity in a world that often wears the disguise of truth. They know the pain of watching someone unravel into a distortion of themselves, and yet they carry on, heart bruised but not closed, soul scarred but not severed. They continue to feel deeply, to hope gently, and to love wisely, trusting that what is meant to stay will do so with constancy, not performance. Their intuition becomes legendary. It is no longer a tool, it becomes a compass of divine clarity. They recognize energies before they manifest. They read between words, feel behind smiles, sense the storm in stillness. No longer surprised by change, they become masters of energetic boundaries, offering presence only to those who match their frequency. They cease chasing illusions. They cease doubting their knowing. They no longer beg for emotional reciprocity. They attract it through the power of their inner light. Through all of this, Cancer becomes a healer not only of others but of themselves. They build lives rooted in authenticity, homes not just of walls but of vibration. They become protectors of emotional legacy, nurturing future connections with the careful grace of one who has endured, evolved, and ascended. No longer defined by those who changed beyond recognition, they define themselves by what remained unshaken: their loyalty, their depth, their cosmic empathy. They do not forget. They do not erase. They transform. They remember not to dwell, but to honor. They carry every lesson like a constellation etched across their emotional sky, guiding them forward into relationships that resonate with truth, not just potential. And as they walk, cloaked in lunar light and cosmic wisdom, they remind the world that change without integrity is a form of betrayal, and that those who no longer see them cannot dim the vision they carry of themselves. Cancer rises in silence, walks in truth, and guards the sacred with a love that endures beyond form. Their path may be lonely at times, but it is never empty, for they carry the moon, the tides, and the echoes of every truth ever spoken in the language of the heart. Cancer's essence is shaped not only by emotion, but by an instinctual memory that reaches beyond this lifetime. Beneath their surface lies an archetype of the protector, the nurturer, and the silent sentinel who remembers what others forget. Their loyalty is not casual. It is ancestral. They are the keepers of emotional continuity in a world of fleeting masks. When someone changes before their eyes, it is not simply disappointing. It is a rupture in the psychic bond Cancer once trusted. It is not the change itself that wounds them, but the abandonment of truth, the erosion of alignment, the hollowing out of a once sacred presence. This pain touches a depth within Cancer that others rarely understand. Their sign is not only ruled by the moon but aligned with the fourth house, the house of roots, family, soul foundations. Cancer is wired to seek emotional anchoring. When others choose duplicity or fragmentation over coherence, Cancer feels the shift like an earthquake in their spiritual foundation. The body may remain the same, the voice unchanged, but something core has vanished. And Cancer, with their lunar sensitivity, is the first to sense it, long before words confirm it. They may not confront immediately. Confrontation is not always their language. Instead, they observe in silence, giving space for truth to surface on its own. This stillness is not passivity, it is strategic emotional observation. Cancer listens to patterns, not promises. They feel the tone behind the sentence, the pause before a response, the absence behind the eyes. They watch as someone once familiar becomes distant, and they begin to prepare their heart for the most sacred act of all, letting go without abandoning their own nature. Their detachment is unlike others. It is not cold or calculated. It is reverent. They mourn before they walk away. They grieve in advance, carrying in their heart the entire journey of that soul as it was, and as it will no longer be. Cancer does not sever ties with anger. They withdraw with grace. They honor what once was, but they do not stay where their spirit is no longer met. And in that departure there is power. There is nobility. There is transcendence. Cancer's strength is not only in emotional depth, but in the fierce sovereignty they reclaim each time someone violates their emotional trust. They learn that their ability to love deeply does not require them to remain available to those who no longer speak the truth of their soul. They understand that walking away does not make them cold, it makes them wise. They do not shut down their heart, but they refine its access. The gateway to their emotional world becomes sacred terrain, guarded not by bitterness, but by discernment forged in heartbreak and rebirth. When others morph into something false, Cancer holds steady to their own emotional blueprint. They may adjust their expectations, they may cry in silence, but they do not become what hurt them. They do not mimic the disconnection they witness. Instead, they illuminate it with contrast. They become even more whole, more real, more spiritually sovereign. They become the embodiment of truth in a sea of shifting personas. And that truth begins to attract what aligns with it. Not quickly, not forcefully, but magnetically, inevitably. Cancer teaches that evolution must come with integrity, that growth without authenticity is just performance, that presence without soul is a facade. They become mirrors, reflecting not only who others are, but who they are no longer. They hold up this reflection without cruelty, allowing others to confront themselves if they dare. And if not, Cancer continues forward, carrying only what is emotionally clean, what is spiritually sound, what echoes with the same frequency as their own inner moonlight. Through all of this, Cancer becomes more than a sign. They become a symbol, a testament to the power of memory, the nobility of emotional endurance, the quiet epic of internal resilience. They teach that silence can be a roar, that walking away can be an act of divine protection, that remembering who you are is sometimes the most courageous act in a world begging you to forget. They remain guardians of emotional truth, sentinels of unseen realms, keepers of sacred loyalty. Their scars are maps, not wounds. Their solitude is sanctuary, not exile. And their journey is not one of retreat, but of ascension. They do not lower themselves to chase the ghosts of who someone used to be. Instead, they rise. They rise as those governed by the moon always do, cyclically, inevitably, beautifully, always returning, always renewed, always more luminous than before. In the end, those who changed without truth, who wore masks and abandoned their own light, will look back and see Cancer not as a loss, but as a sacred opportunity they let slip through their hands. And Cancer, already far ahead, will not look back. Their path, lit by intuition and forged by emotional valor, will carry them forward into realms only the heartborn can enter. The emotional radar of Cancer is not limited to the present moment. It is timeless, a sense that draws from soul memory, karmic imprints, and echoes from emotional timelines long forgotten by most. When others shift and no longer resemble the presence they once embodied, Cancer does not interpret this as a mere change in mood or personality. It is felt as a spiritual fragmentation, a disruption in the soul pattern that once harmonized with their own. Cancer does not need explanations. They sense when someone is no longer rooted in who they claim to be, and that intuitive knowing becomes a quiet prophecy of what must inevitably fall away. In the astrological journey, Cancer is the guardian of the threshold between the inner and outer world. It is not simply a water sign. It is a cardinal force, the initiator of emotion, the prime mover of the heart's landscape. It takes immense strength to hold the sacred space of emotional truth in a world that often thrives on illusion. Cancer does not merely feel, they absorb, transmute, and anchor. When trust is fractured and energy no longer flows with the same authenticity, they become alchemists of experience, turning emotional dissonance into wisdom and betrayal into sacred distance. The sign of Cancer is deeply connected to the archetype of the Divine Mother, but that nurturing energy is not blind. It is discerning. It evolves. Cancer's heart, vast and receptive, is not a place to be taken for granted. It is a temple, and once that temple is violated by inconsistency or duplicity, it closes not with a slam, but with the sacred silence of a sanctuary that refuses to allow impure energy to cross its threshold. Cancer does not chase. They wait. They do not demand. They observe. And when the time comes, they vanish like the tide, leaving behind only the mark of where they once stood in devotion. What may be perceived as emotional withdrawal is often the beginning of Cancer's empowerment. They reclaim the parts of themselves they had offered with full vulnerability, gathering each piece like relics of a sacred past. Their solitude becomes ceremonial. They do not collapse, they cocoon. And from that sacred stillness, they are reborn not into bitterness, but into discernment so refined that they will never again accept less than full presence, full truth, full integrity. Cancer's strength lies in emotional memory, but they are not prisoners of the past. They carry it with reverence, not as a weight, but as a compass. They remember not to linger in what was, but to honor the lessons that now shape their inner law. The moon, their ruler, teaches the cycles of ebb and flow, of holding on and letting go, of rising and retreating. Cancer embodies these rhythms with a grace few comprehend. They learn to move with the current of their own soul rather than fight against it, aligning with divine timing rather than human pressure. As others drift into versions of themselves driven by ego, detachment, or superficial reinvention, Cancer remains anchored to emotional truth. This anchoring does not mean resistance to growth. It means allegiance to authenticity. Cancer does not reject change. They reject betrayal of essence. There is no fear in seeing someone evolve, but there is profound sorrow in seeing someone abandon their original frequency to appease a mask. Cancer does not condemn, but they release. They walk away not because they no longer care, but because they care too deeply to remain in a place where love is no longer honored with the same depth. And yet, despite it all, Cancer does not close their heart to the future. They become guardians of the flame, not its destroyers. They carry within them the capacity to love again, even after the most sacred bonds dissolve. They know that not all who change become strangers, and not all evolution is betrayal. But they no longer tolerate dissonance in the name of history. They rise with their emotions intact and their standards reborn. They become protectors of their own inner peace, their emotional clarity, their sacred space. Their story is one of quiet heroism, of emotional resilience so vast it cannot be diminished by the inconstancy of others. They do not wear armor, but they are fortified by depth. They do not shout their truth, but they radiate it. Cancer's path is not loud, but it is thunderous in its power. They walk away without spectacle, yet the void they leave echoes with the reminder of what was once freely given but is no longer available. The soul of Cancer cannot be purchased, persuaded, or possessed. It must be earned through consistency, truth, and the rare courage to be emotionally real in a world addicted to pretense. Those who align with this sacred vibration find in Cancer a force of devotion beyond all comprehension, a mirror of the divine, a refuge of soul recognition. But those who drift, deceive, or disconnect will find only absence where once there was a heart that burned like a sanctuary flame. In this absence, Cancer is not diminished. They are ascending. Their journey continues, lunar-guided and heart-led, into spaces where they are no longer required to decipher shifting masks or mourn the loss of false versions of love. They rise into their own radiance, cyclical, ancient, and unstoppable. They become not only survivors of emotional betrayal but leaders of emotional truth in a world that desperately needs their light. And in that light, they are never lost. They are found over and over again by the moon, by their own sacred self, by those whose hearts are finally ready to meet them as they are. There is an elemental purity in the way Cancer moves through the world, guided not by strategy but by sensation, by the sacred language of energy that precedes words and outlasts appearances. Cancer does not engage with others solely on the level of personality or presentation. They connect through emotional resonance, through what lies beneath the surface, through the silent frequency of the soul. When that frequency changes, when someone once known begins to vibrate at a different rhythm, one that is no longer in harmony with the emotional symphony they once shared, Cancer feels it immediately, deeply, irrevocably. And that shift is not perceived as a mere behavioral inconsistency. It is a severance of spiritual alignment, a cosmic unraveling that marks the end of something once believed to be timeless. Cancer is not driven by logic but by emotional instinct, a type of ancestral intelligence encoded in their very essence. This instinct does not rely on facts or explanations. It moves from feeling, from the unspoken. They do not need to witness betrayal to know it has occurred. They do not require someone to speak lies aloud to feel the truth slipping away. They sense the thinning of authenticity, the dilution of presence, the emotional absence masked by hollow gestures. They register the discomfort in energy long before the relationship begins to fall apart. This sensitivity is not a weakness but a gift, a divine mechanism through which Cancer is always protected, even when wounded. Yet there is no glamour in the way Cancer bleeds. Their pain is not adorned with rage or theatrics. It is quiet, private, almost sacred. When someone they love changes into something unfamiliar, Cancer does not retaliate. They retreat. They begin the process of internalizing the loss, of absorbing the sorrow like the ocean absorbs the sky's storms. They hold space for what was, even while letting go of what is. Their detachment is ritualistic, a sacred shedding of old emotional skin. Each departure is a death, and each rebirth that follows is deeper than the last. Cancer's sole purpose is not to be untouched by pain but to evolve through it. They are guardians of the heart, but that guardianship includes their own. They learn, often through devastation, that love must be mutual in energy, not just in memory. That someone's presence today must echo their promise of yesterday. That alignment is not about perfection but about truth. And when that truth dissolves, Cancer no longer clings. They do not fight for illusions. They release the rope before it burns their hands beyond repair. In their silence, transformation occurs. While the world mistakes their withdrawal as defeat, Cancer is engaging in something far more powerful than defense. They are undergoing restoration. They are recovering the parts of themselves they gave away too freely. They are integrating the wisdom earned from being misread, underestimated, or taken for granted. They are rebuilding emotional sovereignty from the ashes of disappointment. And when they rise, they do not return the same. They return with sharper vision, with deeper clarity, with an unshakable standard encoded in the marrow of their being. The mythology of Cancer is not rooted in loud heroism, but in the quiet mastery of emotional truth. They do not need to prove their worth. They embody it. They do not plead for understanding. They extend it to themselves first. They are ruled by the moon, the cosmic reflector of light, and like the moon, they do not generate power from the outside. They reflect back what they receive. When love is real, they amplify it with nurturing so profound that it becomes immortal. But when love becomes artificial, performative, or convenient, they mirror the coldness they feel and quietly remove their warmth. Cancer does not need revenge. Their absence is the consequence. Their silence is the verdict. Their emotional withdrawal is not punishment, it is preservation. And in that preservation, they are not just surviving heartbreak, they are mastering the sacred art of self-honoring. They learn that loyalty must never cost them their intuition, that kindness must not silence their discernment, and that love, to be worthy, must speak fluently the language of presence, not just memory. In the cosmic symphony of the zodiac, Cancer plays the notes of remembrance. They are the echoes of what once was, but also the protectors of what must endure. They are not trapped by nostalgia, they are informed by it. They carry the emotional history of their connections as living scrolls, inscribed in feeling, read only by those capable of emotional fluency. And when the story ends, when someone changes beyond recognition, Cancer does not burn the book. They place it on a shelf of sacred experience, close it with reverence, and begin again, their hearts still open, but their vision sharpened. They remain whole, they remain luminous, they remain in motion, like the moon, like the tide, like the soul that never settles for less than full emotional truth. In this way, Cancer teaches not only how to love, but how to let go without turning to stone, how to walk away without becoming bitter, how to believe again without forgetting what they have survived. And in every rising tide, in every lunar return, they carry the epic reminder that emotional depth is not a vulnerability. It is the birthplace of unshakable power.